And welcome, my friends, to the Chick Chat portion, whatever little word you want to put in there, of the Healing Waters broadcast. I am back with my dear friend, who I've only known. Tammy, how long have we known each other? A week now, maybe?
That's it. But you are my dear friend.
Yes, we have become very, very fast friends, because it's amazing when you meet somebody, even if it's virtually, when you meet somebody and your spirits connect and your energy matches, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, this is my long lost friend.
Right.
And that's how I feel about you, Dr. Tammy, is like, you are my long lost friend. And I am so happy that we have connected.
Oh, I can't tell you how grateful I am. So thank you for that. And just so you know, like, the love is mutual, and it's so great. And it's just so refreshing to just, have somebody who you can have that camaraderie with, and you can talk about the real life things, just like we were sharing, like, okay, you're in Maine, you're in a snowstorm. Right. It's a little ominous. We don't know what's going to happen. Can you get out? I mean, and how we can, like, even talking about last week, like wrapping into, we can't control the environment. We cannot, right? So how do we then bring that back into creating that new reality, and not letting the outside environment, reflect on how that's going to create us to feel controlled or stressed or worried or fearful? It's like, let's just roll with this.
Yeah. No, oh, for sure, for sure. For those that didn't hear last week's broadcast, please go back and listen to last week's broadcast, because, oh my gosh, that's a must listen, my friends. That's a must listen. And I shared a kind of a little different side of Dr. Tammy last week, but I want to introduce her a little bit different way today. So, Dr. Tammy, I'm going to read off of your website a paragraph that you have on your website that really grabbed me. And it's a different section than what I read last week about you, but I love this one so much that I just was like, I'm sharing this one today, and then we can talk around it. But Dr. Tammy Sorensen Bescher, am I pronouncing that right?
You're right on, my friend.
Oh my gosh. Her passion in life's mission is to inspire her patients to change their beliefs and perceptions about themselves. She encourages her patients to recondition their minds, hearts, and bodies to a new future self. This embodiment opens her patients to create change, generate gratitude, express joy, become empowered, and produce a heightened flow state that creates a healing space for her patients to feel whole and free. This information is transformational to heal their pain, diminish worry and anxiety, improve sleep, increase energy, and open their hearts to love themselves and others. She collaborates with her patients to break habits and addictions that are keeping them stuck in their predictable past, and creates a download for making new choices that create a new future. Now, if that is not a mouthful,
right,
girlfriend, I want to jump up and run around the room about right now.
No doubt. That is. And I think just with you sharing that, and we talked a little bit about last week, just like, how we show up, like how do we want to show up, even when things change, like we had a couple of instances where my child was home and you had, the phone updated, and, now you're kind of like in the situation with the weather, and that idea of knowing, like, I think one of the major components is so many of us want to control everything around us. And that really just kind of tightens everything up. It boggles the body down, and like the freedom and that flow state, like I shared, can't really be capitulated, because we're so stuck in the body. So how do we reframe that is, and to tie it into last week is, how are we going to let our environment, body, and time really control who we are? And then when things come in, how do we then change that thinking, shorten that refractory period, and then go into a different flow state and feel like, okay, like we can just let that go. Because so many of us will ferment in the worry, like, how am I going to get out? How am I going to get back to North Carolina? And then you're going to go to Colorado, right? Like, it's just like you start to kind of go down that rabbit hole. So it's really just like trusting in self, finding the softness and the grace. I say with a lot of my patients, I go, we're just going to drop the puck. I'm not this huge hockey fan, but this puck is, let's be patient, let's be understanding, let's be compassionate, and let's be kind to ourselves. Because once we can master that, then we know that that's the law of attraction. We have that energy within us, and then it's easier to kind of permeate that out from us.
Oh my gosh. I love that. So do you see in patients, and I know you have a whole story, and I want to dive into a little bit of your backdrop story as well, because I know that you've walked this journey. You don't just preach this journey, but you walk this journey.
Yes.
How much of an impact does our past experiences play in our thought patterns, our belief systems, our mode of operation?
Right. Well, by the time you're 35, you're 95% comes subconsciously programmed, right? So the way you think, act, feel, believe, behave, right? All of it is already there by the time you're 35. So, and especially if there's traumas, there's going to be definitely some, and everybody's going to kind of face that differently, right? You can do EMDR, you can do, right, CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapies, like it depends. You could do breath work. So I think everybody has to find their way of getting there. But my whole thing is about forgiveness. Because once we forgive, and I touched upon this last week, we can make more room for love. And then when we have more love in our hearts, we can create that coherence with our minds. And then and you can see it on whether it's a Garmin or an Oura ring or whatever it is, it's this coherence, this heart rate variability. And then when we see that raised, we know the body is in less stress. We're in calm, relax, rest, digest. So let me know if I can answer that further, or if you have more with that.
So now I feel like I'm having a therapy session here on myself, but I'm gonna make a statement, and then I would love for you to kind of expound around it. So I was raised in a very religious home. My dad has been a pastor my entire life. So I thought I knew a whole lot about forgiveness, because in the spiritual, religious world, forgiveness is thrown around a lot.
Right.
But it's always forgiving someone else for treating you poorly, or forgiving someone else for doing you wrong, or it's always forgiving someone else. But while I learned that part, and I felt like I was a very good forgiver, like I gave people so much grace, almost too much grace.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. So right. that was an issue. But the other piece that I really struggled with, that I really had to come to terms with, is, Dr. Tammy, I didn't know how to forgive myself.
That is exactly
what I didn't know.
I'm so glad you said that.
Oh my gosh. Talk about that for a minute. And we have about 2 minutes, and then we need to go to a commercial break, but talk about that for a minute.
Right. And I think and for me, like, I grew up with boys, there was just a lot of masculine energy, and I didn't really know how to harness that femininity, that softness, right? That grace, that beauty within, because I always thought I had to go out there and like be with the boys. So I think that the forgiveness is like, you have to see that's, how you grew up. Right. I mean, and again, you're more spiritual and I was just more masculine and, within my dynamic. And I think that actually brought me to, part of how come I ended up with my numerous autoimmune conditions. So to me, for me to forgive myself for not knowing how to nurture me, to care for me, to love me, to actually feel that I was worthy. I think is where really that dynamic
Yeah.
is. And so many of us, like our self-worth, our self-esteem, however you want to look at it, really comes from forgiving you as whether that was as the kid, the child, the adolescent, whatever it was, and really kind of going back and really like honing in. And that's part of that mindset, because the mindset is how we handle those stressors every day versus the mindfulness. And praying counts as that too. I have one girlfriend practitioner that, she uses faith. I use meditation because that to me taps into that subconscious programming. So it's really getting out of that programming to know, like, you are worthy, my dear. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of care. You have to love you first, because if you're not loving you first, you're not going to track that same energy out. So then you're going to get somebody that's equal to that energy. And we don't want that. So that's, with part of my coaching is really getting people to understand there is like this dynamic that we need to dive into, but we also don't have to really beat it over the head, because then you're bringing all that energy back up and all those feelings and thoughts, those emotions and those intentions. So if there's a way to modulate it with that care, with once you realize that you need to love you, and you do that through self-care and self-love. And I'm not talking massages and pedicures. That's the pleasure component. I'm like sitting with you, journaling, meditating, focusing, taking walks, like doing things every day that allow you to know that you're nurturing you. You're nurturing that soul within you. So that forgiveness comes through time, but we have to address it first and know that it's there, and then really take that deep dive in, on that intermission, like I say, and then we're able to go and we're able to have that forgiveness, number one, for ourselves. Because like I said, you have to be able to forgive you first to be able to forgive anybody else. And you're a kid and you're a baby and you're a child and you're a product of people who, like I say to my patients, we're a product of the people that we come from, and they have come from people who weren't aligned and attuned in the way that they should have been. And it's like not their fault. So now we're in, much more awareness. We have much more information readily available. So, and, you can't blame. We have to just accept and we have to forgive. And it starts within that heart center. So you can understand that coming from your family background.
Oh, absolutely. And I love them dearly. And,
sure.
they were phenomenal parents. I mean, they were absolutely phenomenal. I was raised in a very loving home. It was great childhood. It really was. But that is something that I have really had to struggle with. And I hear myself say a lot that I forgive myself for what I didn't know.
That's it. Oh, and that's brilliant. And you don't know until you know. Like I say to my patients, they're like, I can't believe I didn't know. Well, I'm like, who's telling you? Who's sharing the knowledge and the information and the education? And that's when you know the what and the why, the how becomes easier.
That's true. That's exactly right. All right. My beautiful friends, we are going to be right back. We have to take a short commercial break, and I cannot wait to come back with Dr. Tammy, because she has a little bit of her backdrop story to tell you how she has come into this space of knowledge that she is going to share with us. So we will be right back.
80% of women will develop a pelvic health condition at some point in their lives. There is relief. There is hope. The Pelvic Floor Store, your resource for personal health.
And welcome back. We are here with Dr. Tammy, and oh my gosh, first half, straight fire conversation. I literally, Dr. Tammy, could sit here and talk to you for days, and I don't even think I would need sleep.
Right. We both resonate on the same wavelength. I love it.
I'm loving this so much. So I have been privy to just a little bit of your backdrop story, but I know I don't know a lot. And I would love to ask you to share a little bit about your backdrop story and what brought you into this space of the knowledge that you so passionately pass on to other people at this point.
Well, yes, and thank you for that. I am truly grateful for you allowing me to share. Just as a kid, like I was just that kid that they couldn't really figure out. I'd get abnormal labs. I'd have weird things going on. I was in the hospital. I mean, and we just didn't know, but I was still active, right? So it was like this bandwidth of like, because when you're a kid, you're so resilient. And then it just kind of caught up with me. And then I started, I got bit by a tick. So then I had, some issues with Lyme, but you got to remember, this is like, late 80s. We didn't really know too much. And there was some, infectious disease doctors got on board and we were trying to figure things out. By the time I got into college, it was like, I was tired a lot of the time and we really couldn't figure it out. But I did a ton of sports in high school and I was like, let me change that trajectory. So, as I aged, we get more of that infectious load, like we all do, and more of that toxic burden. And then to me, I started to get rashes. I had rashes around the nose, on the hands, all through the body, joint pain. And we're just like, we don't know what's going on. And there wasn't just enough information with rheumatology and I wasn't too severe, right? So like juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, like really wasn't the presentation because I wasn't as severe, but they kind of said, we think you have that. So I kind of lived with that for like most of my 20s. But then as I got older and more of that burden and more of that toxic load and that infectious burden came on, I ended up getting married in my 30s. And then I had my first child and I started to have complications. So it was just kind of like this whole process. And then it was like the second pregnancy, sadly, I delivered my son Logan preterm and he ended up unfortunately not surviving, but it was due to an undiagnosed lupus. So it was just kind of like, we didn't know what was happening, but we knew it was this autoimmune spectrum. And then as I further went, I was like, okay, that's when I found functional medicine. So, and then that idea of like, let's look at the root cause, let's figure it out deep down, like where is this coming from, as opposed to the pill for the ill, which I'm not opposed to, but it was the idea of like, what is it within my lifestyle I could change? And what is it that I can change mentally, emotionally, and chemically within me to create that change? So then I was like, I'm going to have another baby. And they told me, and I was 40, they said, you're never going to have another baby. Two top, Colorado fertility specialists were like, you can't do it without IVF. And I'm like, I have eggs. They were nominal, but I said, still, eggs are eggs. Let's get them healthy and let's get them where they need to be. And then I ended up having my daughter Reese right before I turned 41. And then we found out, now again, I had the diet and the lifestyle, right? And I had the sleep and I really didn't realize how stressed I was. I am a New Yorker. I schooled and did everything in Manhattan. And I believe what happens with people like us is like, and you get it, you're from the East Coast, is that we really don't understand the breadth and the depth of everything that we take on. It is a tremendous load and it's a tremendous burden. You take care of your family, you take care of your friends, you are in your work, you're in your profession. I'm taking care of these young kids. We ended up with a huge mold exposure. From a dishwasher that the valve ended up leaking and my whole entire how would you say it? Kitchen island went into my basement. So there was this toxic load. So then you kind of look, never treated the Lyme, never treated the mold. And then all of a sudden, like I'm diagnosed with, they're like, you've got lupus and you've got 16 other autoimmune conditions. And again, a lot of them cross over. Mm-hmm. So you could have RA and Sjogren's and type 1 diabetes, which is usually at birth. But it was like MS, it was scleroderma, it was Hashimoto's. You name it, like I was the poster child for autoimmunity. And that was kind of what really came into being because then it was 2020 and now we're full on into COVID. And then of course the stress and, my clinic is shut down and everything is happening with my kids being home and so then everything exacerbated. So, I have a great care team and I'm truly grateful for that. But the biggest component for me is, my mindfulness with my meditation, because I have to overcome myself and who I was. And the old Tammy and the sick body needed to be able to change because you're going to stay sick. For me, this is me personally, stayed sick in a body that didn't change. It took me to change the way I thought, behaved, act, felt. I had to give up the control, the judgment, the stress. And that's what's really so important. That's the foundation. Though, of course, we have to look at the gut. We have to look at what foods are creating, sensitivities, is it gluten and dairy? So that's why with a lot of my coaching now, I really focus on, what I can take out to alleviate that burden. And we usually look at food, right? Because food is thy medicine, Hippocrates, but it's also something we put in our mouth 3 to 10 times a day. So what is it that we can lower burden in that front and then getting people to move? And it's like, you can go out dancing. You can go to a yoga class. If you need to do HIIT, go do that. But it doesn't have to be the same stringent thing. So I rode a tightrope for so long. And that stress of like having to eat a certain way, having to think a certain way, having to be a certain way, having to work out a certain way. It's like now I'm free of all of that. Because now once I've aligned and attuned with the mindfulness and the meditation, and that is where you overcome the subconscious programming versus the mindset of how I show up every day. That's where I started to make the changes. But when people see me, I mean, I still focus on how do we create and eliminate foods. And then I'll say, okay, these are some of the supplements we can work with, because you want to get them out of pain. You want to get them out of IBD, right? Whether it's diarrhea or constipation, you got to get them out of the pain that they're in, and you have to create a transformation for them. And then you can go more into the other mindset component. So that's how I was able to create my journey.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like with all the things that they diagnosed you with, it was almost like you accepted the fact that you were just not well.
Right.
And that's the story that you lived with until you decided to change the narrative.
That's right. It took me, you are right on, Marie. It is exactly what it was. How am I going to change what I need to change to create the life that I want, the body, the life, and the future that I want? I mean, now don't forget, I mean, I have 2 young kids.
Right.
I mean, that is a huge thing. And lupus is, I mean, that attacks the organ systems. I mean, lupus is a very, very tough diagnosis. And I think that, and I look back years ago and I'm like, God, I've had this forever, because we had all the testing, but they didn't have the advanced testing they did back then in the early to late 80s. So I'm like, wow, this is what this has been all along. So, I have to take ownership for what that is. And I have to go, what is it within me? So I look at those symptoms as a way my body, as they say with autoimmunity, your body attacks itself. But why is it attacking itself?
Right.
So what is it that I can reduce some of the burden? So, and my mentor, Dr. Jill Carnahan, I mean, she would say it like clean water, clean air, and clean food. Start there. Use a water filter, get an air purifier, and, eat organic just to release some of that burden, because that's free advice and that's easy advice, right? And how do we just kind of lower that? And I think, I love her, and she's also my doctor and she's my colleague, right? But it's this idea of how we can share information that can have such simplicity and but also be so powerful. And that really, because if you look at the autoimmune conundrum, it is a toxic load, and stress is toxic, just like BPA is toxic, absolutely. Right? Or phthalates, you can go down the laundry list. So where can we mitigate? Where can we take out and simplify? But rigidity didn't work either, because the more rigid I came, I was paleo, I was HIIT training, I got sicker.
Wow.
Right. So you're looking at me, you're like, what could possibly be wrong with her? She eats a certain way, she does this, but that is where the misnomer is. I don't know how many people walk in my office door, because I'm in my office, and it's like, I'm already gluten-free and I work out and do yoga and hot yoga, and they're still so sick. They're still in that space. So, I am just their consultant. I just guide them and say, like, look, work with the doctor. Let's open this idea up. And that's the difference. And we can then bring in that mindfulness mindset component, but we have to get them in a place where they can actually move and feel ease and feel grace, or else they're never going to be able to sit through any of that stuff.
It's so true. And I think that just because one thing works for one person does not mean that it's going to work for everybody across the board.
Oh, totally. And I think that's the other part. You hit it right square where it needs to be said, because some people with just diet and exercise alone can do stellar. And I've seen it.
Right.
And other people need more. And I think the more severe the symptom, meaning like if it's, a lupus diagnosis, which can affect organs and, your eyes, and if you got, all these underlying Sjogren's and Hashi, which affects thyroid, like you're talking about a whole different, situation. So, versus like somebody's coming in with just IBD or IBS with constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating, distension. So, you have to understand the brevity, or the word is the gravity of all of this. Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to, that's why for me, I want to help these busy moms, overcome this autoimmune exhaustion and this pain, so that they can live this active, fun-filled life, because that's what we're here for. Right. Because it's not, I'm telling you, the joy is lost. And you're left with that sadness and like, what is my life going to be? So that's the give back. And if you've experienced it, that's where, to me, it's all about the share. It's all about the giving and being in that space. And if you have something to share and to help people with, That's my goal, is to spread that message.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I can just hear women saying, oh my gosh, maybe there is hope for me. And I can just hear them saying, where do I start? Where do I begin? And so I know we're coming to the end of our chat time together, but can you share with our listening audience, like, how they can reach out to you, how they can get in touch with you?
Right. I mean, my website is the number one source. It's Dr. Tammy Sorensen-Becher.com. And my name of my practice is Sorensen Health and Acupuncture. So, I mean, like, that is what my doctorate is in, right? So I focus on that, but I'm, clinically trained in nutrition, but, outside of state lines, it's all coaching, right? I mean, the idea is to give coaching, and you can do amazing things with coaching in and of itself. And the beauty is like, you can work very superficially in the beginning, so people can understand, like, we can go through certain foods and you don't need testing. Or then sometimes, like, I'll say, hey, well, let me connect with your doctor, and I'll say, can we collaborate together? And then maybe they can do that testing, right? So the idea is, like, you have to be open to the idea that, there are only solutions and not problems, right? Like, that's part of what this has to come back to. Very Beatles-esque saying it in that way. Right? I mean, and once you look at it that way, you can realize that there's always ways to work around. And having somebody that's gone through it and been dragged through the mud and has come out the other side, I understand what people go through. And the biggest thing with autoimmunity is so hard to diagnose.
Wow.
It's so hard to diagnose. And then the one time it'll be like, oh, you just have RA and Sjogren's. And then the next time it's like, oh, no, actually that's lupus, right? So it's like, you have to really know what to look for and have compassion and care. I mean, and I think for all of my autoimmune patients, even cancer patients, heart disease patients, I mean, across the board, it's having that kindness and compassion for yourself. It has to start there, because if it doesn't start there, how are you going to resonate that out to other people? So that's part of my pillars. I shared this last week: healthy relationships with yourself, and then looking at your movement, looking at your stress, looking at your sleep, and looking at your nutrition. That's what functional medicine is. It is a lifestyle medicine. And that is what we want to share. And Dr. Mark Hyman, I would say, is a stellar resource. I mean, he's got his new book, the longevity book, that's out, but he's got a plethora of books that are out there. And again, you're spending $15 to $25 on a book that will really change your life.
Right.
So I want to.
You're a wealth of information, Dr. Tammy. You really, really are. And you know what? Not only are you a wealth of information, but you are a wealth of hope. And I think I love that almost more than I love the information, is that you are a hope dealer.
Yes. Thank you. I love that. I'm going to coin that.
That's right. That's fine with me.
Because I think that for so many people, that's like me. Oh, actually, like, this is like a testimonial, right? It can happen. And when people can see that it can happen, and again, it's not a cookie cutter recipe, but like, we can get you a lot of the way there with really dialing into all those, like I shared with my 5 pillars, and really honing in on them and really focusing on what we can do to create the change. But you have got to be willing to change.
Yes.
I mean, like, if you're not willing to change, you got to want, and you have to meet your community where they're at, not where you want them to be.
Right.
That's the other part. So that's why I always say, like, nobody wants to start it. Let's do mindfulness and meditation. That's always the last pillar. The first pillar is give me something to make sure, that I can function and I can be able to do what you're asking me to do. And let's, take out some of this load, this burden. So, I mean, that's where I like to start. And, and then the bonus is like, you lose the stubborn belly fat. You end up having more motility, right? And more mobility to move. You end up doing all these different things because you're taking away the burden and you're nourishing the body, the soul, the heart, and the mind. That's the difference. And that's where you can you collaborate this Rubik's Cube.
Right.
That's what it feels like.
I love that so much. That is such a great way of doing it. So Dr. Tammy, I hate that we have come to the end of the segment, because I just enjoy chatting with you so much. I learn so much from you every time we chat. And I know this is not only the last time that we communicate together. I know this is only the beginning.
Absolutely.
So,
And And I want to see you in Colorado.
Yes, I know. I think I'm just going to fly back out just to spend time with you.
And I would be more than happy to have you. You know that. And you and I are on the same page. We like to do the same outdoor enthusing. So we're right here together. Fun. It's like sisters from another mother.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So to all of you, wherever you are at in the world, I am here to let you know through Dr. Tammy and myself, Marie Kennedy Groves, that we are hope dealers. And we have these conversations with you to let you know that we are real people with real issues, battling the same things. You're not alone. Right. So reach out, because that's your responsibility to reach out and get help. So we will put Dr. Tammy's information at the bottom of the screen. If you have not subscribed to the Healing Waters broadcast, click the subscribe button below and never miss an episode, because it is amazing conversations such as this that will change your life. I am excited for all the people that will get help from this broadcast, and we appreciate you tuning in. Dr. Tammy, thank you, and we will talk again real soon.
Yes, thank you. I'm truly grateful and appreciative for the opportunity.
No problem. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, love.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. So we're almost out of time on the Zoom, but thank you so much.
Oh, yes. And if you ever wanted to like dive into like sleep or like talking about, like, okay, what do you, I mean, anything from like, what supplement do you use for pain? What do you do for like, how do you create the right sleep environment, like for sleep hygiene? If you ever wanted to dive in, just be like, oh, this is something I want to do. And you can, I mean, my thing is we got to get it out.
Yes.
People don't know that this is part of it. And I'm not saying it's all of it, but we know food is huge, but getting into like, if you're like, hey, like, can we talk about carbs? Or, I mean, like, I'm happy to share, to be a resource for you on any level.
And I would love that. What I will do is I'll reach out to you to set up another interview time. Right. And maybe we can pick just a couple of subjects to go over, because, one of the things I'm just thinking about, that people say, oh, I would love to eat clean, but it's too expensive.
Right. Oh, great. And I have a ton of information on that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And so maybe that's a subject that we talk about, but also the sleep thing, I think, is huge, because people have horrible sleep patterns.
Oh yeah. And it totally affects, because their brain is not detoxing. And then that makes it harder for people to stay non-stressed, because the agitation and anger without with the lack of sleep then creates, that imbalance.
Right. And then I'm sure that there's a whole thing you can go into about REM sleep and, I mean, people can sleep, but not really get rest.
Right. Really get.
And then that affects your body and I say all the time, stress will kill you in one way or another. That's why
hands down.
Got to get a handle on that.
It's number one. You are right. I mean, and that's the beauty where like with Marie, like that's what's so great about you is like, you have that essence within you. So, I mean, you can, and I think if you're thinking about it, your audience is thinking about it. Right. So I think that would be great to be able to, how do we eat clean, on a budget?
Yes. Yes.
And then really talking.
I'm going to make a note on this one. How to eat clean on a budget.
And then, talking about like sleep hygiene, how to set you up for success, to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep, and just talk about the basics. Right.
Okay. What was the last one? How to,
it's like, fall asleep and stay asleep.
Oh, yeah.
So you get your, I mean, and again, you would need a fitness tracker, a Fitbit, a Garmin, an Oura Ring to be able to know whether or not it's happening. But I mean, that could be something where people don't even realize that they could find it in that. So we can give them knowledge and information. The whole idea is to give the shares, is to give the information.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're about to get cut off here.
Yes.
Dr. Tammy, thank you so much.